What's up, guys? My name's Dean, or as most of you know me, Twisty, and it's time to wrap up round 16 of the AFL season. But first, let's have a look at last week's ladder, because I just want to show you the changes here. So, Geelong, GWS, and Sydney made up the top four with Hawthorn, and then Adelaide, the Bulldogs, and North Melbourne, sort of, the next teams below them. But if we take a look at now, the new ladder, we see there's a huge change within that top eight. Sydney have jumped from 4th to 2nd. The Crows, the Dogs, and the Eagles have jumped from 6th, 7th, and 8th into 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And the teams that had losses this week, Geelong, the Giants, and North Melbourne, sort of have dramatically dropped down in that top eight. And you can see that there is very little actually separating a couple of sides. So West Coast is actually only beating out Geelong by, I think, a matter of percentage points if we take a look at it on the ladder. Okay, so I've actually got it wrong there. West Coast actually on 135.4. But that is still only like a 2-3 goal gap. And same with the Giants. They are only 1 goal behind Geelong in terms of percentage. So that is a critical aspect come the finals, because if that does end up being the final separation, like half a goal or something in percentage gap between, Geelong and the Giants, that could be a huge difference between where they finish in the top 8. If you're 6th or 7th, that's the difference between a home elim final or an away elimination final. And you don't really want that if you're either of those two teams. So, very, very big. Team's going to have to win. We don't really want to look at the bottom 10 of the ladder there. It doesn't really make too much of a difference. The only change is St Kilda jumping over Richmond. But let's get into the footy. Let's talk about that. Friday night, the Hawks beat the Power. Oh, actually, it's Thursday night, sorry. The Hawks beat the Power by 22 points. It was a pretty good performance by the Hawks there. They're just sort of slowly working their way back into finals form. Robbie Gray was, of course, the best man on the ground, though, so hopefully he gets the 3 votes, even though his side lost. But Port Adelaide, they show some promising signs, but they're pretty much a tease for the year. Haven't really proven too much to us, other than they are consistently inconsistent. So whether or not we see how them go up the ladder next year is going to be, another question. What's his name? Essendon bloke. When Ryder comes back, Monfries may never play again if they don't give him another deal. So that's an interesting one in itself. But Port Adelaide, they'll be trying to push. I think next year we'll actually have a lot of teams pushing for the top 8, because this year sort of everyone sort of dipped and then they're ready to rebirth. But we'll get into that later on. But next, let's look at the top 8 v top 8 clash. The first one for the week was Friday night, Geelong and the Sydney Swans. I didn't see this coming. I did not see a Sydney victory coming down at the Cattery. Kieran Jack was inspirational, kicked 3 goals in his 200th game, and it was 38 points in the end, so really big win to the Swans. Dangerfield had 18 touches in the first quarter, and then only 18 for the remainder, or 16 for the remainder of the game, so he was held very well after then. I think only 3 or 4 touches in that second quarter. So Sydney really nullified his impact after quarter time, and that was one of the key things that got them back up, got them in front in this game early, and actually no, not early, but kept them in front of the game. And I think that's a really good job, and credit to Sydney to show that Geelong are vulnerable. Like Selwood's not even up there in the top 3 possession getters. So if you can nullify Dangerfield's impact, even though he might get a lot of the ball, that's really something you've got to do if you're, a top 8 side going to play against Geelong in the finals. But they've got plenty of work to do, Geelong. We said pre-season that they're not going to win a flag off the back of Dangerfield, and clearly it's starting to show those signs now that if their best players aren't at 100% every game, the rest of their team sort of does a bit of a slump, and they get beaten by a side like the Sydney Swans. So Geelong got plenty of areas to work on in that one, but Sydney very, very good. The next game we're taking a look at is on Saturday, the early game. I didn't actually catch too much of this game because I was playing tennis at the time. So the Giants, huge upset loss by Collingwood, winning by 28 points in the end, or 30-something points. Can't do math. 32 points in the end was the final margin. Cameron kicked 5, but Cloak was probably the most dangerous forward on the ground, kicked 4 goals, and he looked very good from what I saw in the highlights package. Travis Cloak, very, very good in there. But Collingwood, can they make a late run for the finals here? North Melbourne's the team that could drop out. We showed it to you, I think, just after they hit 9-0, I showed you their run back and said, well, they're facing all these top 8 sides. They played Collingwood as well. So if Collingwood could knock off North Melbourne then have their final 4 weeks against top 8 sides. So anything's possible these days. If Collingwood beat them and then they lose to all 4 of those top 8 teams, North Melbourne will then drop to 10 losses, which is crazy to think, considering they were 9-0. So plenty of work to do. And the Giants, they probably had their worst game for the season. Still almost kicked 100 points. Cameron and Patton were pretty good up forward. But, definitely they need a little bit of, I don't know. Maybe that's the loss that they need. Generally, if we've got all these sides sort of competing very hard to make those, top 4 positions, you don't really want to go into the finals without having a loss for a while, because I know you want to go in with winning form, but you generally can learn more from a loss than you can from a win in some ways, because you can find out what areas you really need to work on, rather than if you just keep winning, sort of those areas aren't as, big of a problem until obviously you get a loss. So maybe this is the loss the Giants need to spur them on through the final series. The next game was the Q Clash, the Twilight game. The Suns, big winners, big scores all around. 250 points between these two teams. The Suns getting home by 26 points in the end. Peter Wright and Tom Lynch kicked 10 goals between them. Eka Hipwood kicked 4 goals for the Brisbane Lions. But once again, the Gold Coast Suns, they're continuing to tease us, I guess, late in the season as to, where they could potentially be going for next season. They've got majority of their side back, so if they do sort of retain their list for the end of the season and then come back strongly next year, they could be another one of those sides that can push into that top 8. And again, they'll probably get a favourable draw too if they finish in the bottom 6. And the Brisbane Lions, where to for them? Well, I didn't really expect them to win this game. I think they've got Essendon coming up in the next couple of weeks, so that's really their crunch time grand final. If they lose to the Bombers, they get pick 1. If they don't, and probably lose their coach in the process. So we'll wait and see how that goes. Hopefully Brisbane can, get a couple more wins other than just the one they've already got before the end of the season, because it just doesn't look good for them at the moment. Let's go now to Saturday night. I was at Etihad Stadium to watch this glorious game of football. The Dogs sneaking home over the line against the Tigers. Stringer kicked 4 goals, 3 of those in the final quarter, I might add. And the Tiger forward, Jack Riewoldt, he just misses some easy opportunities lately, Jack. He's been doing it. He's number 3 in the competition for behinds, behind Buddy and Kennedy. So really needs to, just up his game a little bit in his set-shotting ability. So 2 goals, 5 goals, you win the game. I mean, I'm just saying. Dustin Martin was outstanding with 38 touches and just gives the don't argue to just about everyone. But Richmond, they looked really, really good. I was really happy. The Dogs, they sort of butchered the ball use in the first quarter. They had about 14 inside 50s and only kicked a couple of goals in that opening term. So they really needed to fix up their ball use. And in the second half, it was really their back line that managed to get the run and spread out of there, that put them back over the line in that final quarter. And Richmond's sort of forward 50 entries in that final quarter were pretty bad. And that's where the Dogs were able to work their way, back forward into that contest and get over the line. I thought, Castagna was pretty good on the weekend, so that's a tick. Menadue, first half was pretty good of a tick, yes. But he's got to sort of work that out as well. He'll build that tank naturally. Markov was outstanding on debut, 18 touches, and he just looked very damaging off the half-back line. Every one of his possessions were just pushing forward up the ground, had a bit of run and carry with him, and just hit a target most of the time. So he did pretty good. Still got some areas to work on though, of course. Liam McBean sort of had a little bit of a nervous start, but again, he's looking pretty good. He's going to get a couple more games to, show what he can do. So if he gets sort of a bit of a rhythm at AFL level, maybe he'll be, the next big thing in our forward line. Griffiths looked pretty good as well. But, Richmond, they just need to have those guys coming through, and that's the thing. And you look at Richmond's probably slow passages of play, and that's because they've got no half-back line. Yaron hasn't played all year. McIntosh is injured. Alice is injured. Hooley's been injured. So these type of players need to, that's where you get a Markov or a Castagna or a Menergy to play off that half-back line and sort of push that run. Anyway, I'm talking too much, Richmond. Let's move on. Good win by the Dogs in the end. Let's look at the Coleman, and it's dead even at the top of it. Franklin and Kennedy, 53 each. Lynch, 48. Jenkins, 43. Everyone's probably too far back other than that. So, looks like a 3-horse race. Lynch could bag a couple of goals towards the end of the year here. No one's going to kick 100 plus this season. I think it'll be 80 or so for Franklin and Kennedy, or even less in some instances. But there's your top 9, and the Crows feature a couple of players in there. Actually, feature 3 players in there. And that's something that Hawthorn's done over the last couple of years, is they've had Bruce, Gunston, and Roughhead. Those top 3 have been in that top 10 of Coleman medal, participants. Their forwards kick goals, and that's where Hawthorn's been able to win the flag. Bruce hasn't been as good this year, but look at the Crows. They could be that side come finals time to be the most damaging forwards, have their forwards kick the goals, and win them the flag. So that's still in the realms of possibility. Next game was at TIO Stadium. Melbourne beat the Dockers by 32 points. Hogan kicked 4 goals, was pretty good. Probably the best man on the ground, apart from Jones, who had 35 touches. And Pavlich kicked 3 for the Dockers. So Melbourne doing what they need to do, beating sides that they should beat, and beating them, to a reasonable enough level. So I think that they've done pretty good here, Melbourne. They'd be happy with their performance. They can get a couple more wins like this towards the end of the year. They'll be pretty happy with a finish just outside the top 8, because I don't think anyone's going to jump into that top 8. But let's keep moving on. Sunday now. Carlton and Adelaide. Dennis Armfield kicked 4 goals, 3 of those in the first quarter, all from outside 50. Single-handedly kept his team in that opening quarter and pretty much the opening half, until Adelaide sort of just flew away in that second half. Jenkins, Betts, and Jacobs all kicked 3 goals for the Crows. Sloan was pretty good as well, but he couldn't hit a target. I wanted Supercoach points because I've got Sloan as my captain. He had 111 or 114 Supercoach points. If he actually hit a target, he would have had 130 plus. So, very disappointed with you, Roy Sloan. That's up to you. Gibbs is okay as well, 34 touches. It'll be interesting to see how Carlton go when they get Mark Murphy back, or seeing if they can, get another couple of young kids in. Oh yeah, and Jack Silvani kicked his first goal. I missed that one. Can't remember if he missed the first shot and then nailed the second one. I can't quite remember. But I was watching it, so that's just my memory fading me. But let's keep going. West Coast and North Melbourne. West Coast finally get the wood over one top 8 side, and it was actually the first top 8 side they played at home. So they're a 6 or 7 goal better side at home. They won by 5 goals. So they play this game away. They lose by a couple of goals. Kennedy kicked 4, Cripps kicked 3, Leclerc kicked a couple, and for North, Brown, Thomas kicked multiple goals for the North Melbourne. And West Coast, they tick along at home. It'll be interesting to see how they go if they don't get a home final. And I think it's been real interesting that West Coast, they've only played 6 top 8 sides. They've lost 5 of those matches, and yet they're sitting in 5th position. So they've got somewhat of a favourable draw for a team that finished in the grand final last year. So whether or not they can replicate that performance, they'll need a big final series. And it's going to be hard if they have to play away from home for a couple of weeks. So we'll see how West Coast go later on in the year. But the final game of the round, the Bombers almost upset the Saints. I was going hard for the Bombers late in this one. Fantasia kicked 3. Danaher missed a couple of shots as well. And Tip and Woody kicked a couple of goals for the Bombers. They just looked dangerous in that forward line. Danaher, if he doesn't get mark of the year for that mark in the final quarter, I am so bemused as to what will beat it, because he got so bloody high. It was one of the ridiculously good marks you'll see all year. That's probably mark of the year. I can't see anything beating it. And the Saints, Memory kicked 5 goals for them, and then they managed to get over the line. Jack Stephen had 41 touches, another 40-plus game for him. Seb Ross, 32, and Joey Montagna had 28 disposals. So once again, the Bombers fall short. St Kilda beat a side they should beat, but still remain slightly inconsistent. It's going to be, yeah. It's hard to place these two sides. St Kilda probably had a couple of years to develop, and they should be at that stage where they're pushing for, finals. The Bombers, they should be, thereabouts next year. I don't think they'll be in the finals next year, even though they get all their players back. Next year I can see 15 teams trying to make the finals. Like Port will try and push Melbourne, Collingwood, St Kilda should be there, Richmond should be up there, Carlton, you never know what they're going to do, the Gold Coast should be there, Fremantle might do a miracle and get there. The only side is probably Brisbane that, might not, be able to push for the finals next year. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves too far into the future. And just finally, the top 8 v top 8. Geelong lost to the Swans, who moved up in that top 8 v top 8 ladder. And North Melbourne got another loss. So they're 2-5. West Coast are 1-5. North Melbourne still got 4 top 8 teams to play. They play, I think, the Dogs, the Giants, Hawthorn, and Geelong on their run home. So we'll wait and see how that goes. And that's it for this week's round wrap up. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Please leave a big thumbs up. I'm sorry if I ranted a little bit too long, but I just try and say as much as I possibly can in these videos and just get it done. So thank you so much for watching. Have a good day, and I'll see you guys later.